You found your way to Whispers of Crimes, a quiet corner where the shadows of the past are gently told. Here, we speak of real crimes and mysteries, not to shock or scare, but to wonder, to reflect, and maybe to help you fall asleep. So close your eyes, let your thoughts slow down, and come with me into tonight's case. On the night of December 16th, 2012, a brutal and senseless attack shook India to its core. A 23-year-old physiotherapy intern, Jyoti Singh, and her friend boarded a bus, unaware that the night would turn into a nightmare. What followed was a horrific assault, leaving the world in shock. 6 men, led by Ram Singh, subjected Jyoti to unimaginable brutality using an iron rod. They destroyed her body, leaving her for dead on the side of the road. For over a week, she fought for her life, but ultimately succumbed to her injuries. Her death sparked protests that would change the course of India's fight against gender violence. The case became a symbol of the fight for justice, as the nation demanded accountability and reform. But this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a wake-up call. The search for justice, the legal battles, and the long road to execution would leave a legacy that continues to inspire change. Chapter 1. A chilling December night. It was the night of December 16th, 2012. The weather in New Delhi was cold, with temperatures dipping as low as 10 degrees Celsius, characteristic of the city's harsh winter. Amidst the bustling streets of the capital, a young woman named Jyoti Singh, a 23-year-old physiotherapy intern, had just finished a movie at a cinema in Saket. Her male friend, a co-worker, had come along for the evening, and they were trying to find their way back home to Dwarka. The time was around 9:30 p.m. when they boarded a private bus from a nearby bus stop. The bus, however, wasn't what it seemed. Despite being a private vehicle, it had been converted into a makeshift transportation option, illegally operated with tinted windows and a shabby interior. The driver, Ram Singh, along with his 5 accomplices, including his younger brother Mukesh, Pawan Gupta, Vinay Sharma, Akshay Thakur, and a 17-year-old juvenile, were all in the bus that night. The 6 men were not strangers to each other. They had plotted this attack, scouting the area earlier that evening for a potential victim. Once Jyoti and her friend boarded the bus, the door was quickly locked behind them. The situation took a violent turn. Ram Singh drove the bus while his accomplices, in a premeditated attack, began terrorizing the couple. The male friend was immediately beaten with an iron rod, knocked unconscious, and thrown to the side of the bus. He later reported that he had heard Jyoti scream, but before he could react, he too lost consciousness. As the brutal assault continued, Jyoti was dragged to the back of the bus where the men took turns raping her. They used the iron rod to inflict more severe injuries, causing permanent damage to her internal organs. The entire attack lasted for over 45 minutes as the men showed no remorse. In the end, they dumped Jyoti and her unconscious friend in a desolate area near the Medipalpur flyover, far from where they had been picked up. The attackers believed they had escaped undetected. However, they didn't count on the intervention of a passerby, who happened to notice the victims lying on the side of the road in a condition that shocked even the most hardened individuals. It was nearly an hour before they received help. The severity of the attack soon became evident, and the police began their investigation immediately. Chapter 2. The Aftermath of Brutality. The brutality of the attack sent shockwaves through the community and the nation. Jyoti, with severe internal injuries, was rushed to Safdarjung Hospital, where she was immediately operated on. Her intestines were severely damaged, and parts of them had to be surgically removed. She was in critical condition, unable to speak, but in those initial moments, she was able to identify her attackers. Her male friend, though physically injured, survived the attack and corroborated the details of the assault. His testimony would be crucial in ensuring that the perpetrators were apprehended. While he recuperated, Jyoti's condition worsened. She was later airlifted to Singapore's Mount Elizabeth Hospital, where doctors tried their best to stabilize her. However, the damage was too severe for even the most skilled medical professionals to reverse. As Jyoti fought for her life, the nation began to rally in support. The media brought attention to the case, with calls for justice reverberating across the country. People's hearts broke for this young woman who had been so brutally attacked, but more importantly, they began to ask a crucial question. Why had such an atrocity been allowed to happen? Women's safety, it seemed, had been pushed aside for too long. On December 29, 2012, after battling for 13 days, Jyoti Singh succumbed to her injuries. She passed away in Singapore, leaving behind a grieving family and a nation filled with sorrow and rage. Her death marked the beginning of a larger movement for women's rights and safety in India. Chapter 3. The manhunt begins. With Jyoti's death, Delhi police shifted gears into high alert mode. A task force was formed, and the hunt for the perpetrators began immediately. The key to solving the case came in the form of the white bus, which had been used for the assault. The bus had a registration number that could be traced back to Ram Singh, the driver, who was a local man from the area. Police soon discovered that Ram Singh was no stranger to criminal activity. Although he had not been arrested before, his past included a history of reckless driving and other petty offenses. He had been working as a driver on the bus for years, but this was the first time he had used the vehicle for such a heinous purpose. Through Ram Singh, police were able to track down the other men involved in the assault. His younger brother Mukesh was apprehended shortly after the arrest of Ram Singh. Police also arrested the other suspects, Pawan Gupta, a fruit seller, Vinay Sharma, a gym assistant, and Akshay Thakur, a migrant laborer. The last suspect was a 17-year-old juvenile whose identity was kept confidential under Indian law. All of them were charged with rape, murder, kidnapping, and other crimes related to the attack. Forensic evidence soon corroborated the testimony of the victims. Blood stains, fingerprints, and even hair samples were all found on the bus, linking the perpetrators to the crime. With this solid evidence, it became clear that the men had not only committed a horrific act, but had also been reckless in their attempt to cover it up. Chapter 4. National Outrage and Protests. The news of Jyoti's death and the horrifying details of her assault sparked a wave of protests throughout India. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves not only through Delhi, but across the entire nation. This wasn't just another case of rape. It was an example of unchecked violence against women, one that ignited a fury that had been building for years. Mass protests erupted in the streets of Delhi, with citizens demanding justice for Jyoti Singh. Young people, especially students, took to the streets in large numbers. They gathered outside India Gate, chanting slogans like, "We want justice" and "Stop rape." The protests weren't just about Jyoti, but about the systemic issues of sexual violence and the inadequacies in the justice system. Women's rights groups, both local and international, lent their support to the cause. There were hunger strikes, sit-ins, and candlelight vigils held in cities across the country. The protests also called for greater protection for women, faster police response times, better legal frameworks for handling sexual crimes, and a radical shift in societal attitudes towards women. At the same time, the government faced mounting pressure. They initially responded with attempts to control the protests, using tear gas and water cannons to disperse crowds, but this only made matters worse. Public anger was palpable. Political leaders were forced to address the issue in parliament. The public demanded that laws be changed, and that justice be served swiftly for the perpetrators of such violent acts. The protests would become a turning point in the movement for women's safety in India, galvanizing young people and women's rights groups into a united front. Chapter 5. The Trial and Legal Proceedings. The trial for the 5 adult accused, Ram Singh, Mukesh, Vinay, Pawan, and Akshay began in a special fast-track court in early 2013. This court was set up to expedite cases involving serious crimes, particularly sexual assault. The prosecution presented a case based on overwhelming evidence, including DNA samples, eyewitness testimony, and physical evidence from the crime scene. Each of the accused had different levels of involvement in the crime, but all were charged with the same set of heinous offenses. Ram Singh, who had been the driver of the bus, was considered the ringleader. His role in orchestrating the crime was evident, and he was the first to be arrested. Throughout the trial, the surviving victim provided heart-wrenching testimony. She described in painful detail the violence she had endured during the attack, giving the court and the public a glimpse of the horrors she had faced. The victim's bravery in recounting the events became a symbol of the fight for justice. Despite their best efforts to defend themselves, all 5 adults were found guilty on charges of rape, murder, kidnapping, and other related offenses. On September 10, 2013, the court sentenced the 5 men to death. However, the trial was far from over. The men appealed their sentences, a process that would stretch out over several years. Their families filed mercy petitions seeking to reduce the death sentences. The legal battles continued, and the process of execution seemed interminable. Chapter 6. The Execution Controversy. The long delay in the execution of the accused was a point of contention. Despite the guilty verdict, the convicts used every legal avenue available to delay the process, including filing petitions for mercy with the President of India. This process dragged on for years, with public anger growing each time a petition was filed. On March 20th, 2020, after nearly 8 years of legal battles, the 4 remaining convicts, Mukesh, Pawan, Vinay, and Akshay, were finally executed by hanging at Tihar Jail in Delhi. The execution was carried out early in the morning, and it was the first time in more than a decade that such a mass execution had taken place. The news of their execution sparked mixed reactions. Some saw it as justice finally being served, while others viewed it as a temporary solution to a much larger problem. Many activists and advocates for criminal justice reform believed that the delay in carrying out the death penalty was a reflection of the dysfunction of the system, one that allowed these men to use every possible loophole to avoid punishment. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Nirbhaya. The tragic death of Jyoti Singh, known to the world as Nirbhaya, has left a lasting legacy in India. Her story became a symbol of the fight for justice for women who have been victims of violence. Her case not only sparked the largest wave of protests for women's rights in Indian history, but also led to legal reforms aimed at strengthening the punishment for sexual offenses. In 2013, the Indian government passed the Criminal Law Amendment Act, which significantly increased the punishment for rapists and introduced the death penalty for certain types of sexual crimes. The act also expanded the legal definition of rape, criminalized voyeurism, and introduced harsher punishments for acid attacks. These changes were a direct result of public outcry following Jyoti's death. The case also led to the establishment of more fast-track courts to expedite trials involving sexual violence, and more stringent measures were taken to improve women's safety in public spaces. But despite these changes, the issue of sexual violence in India remains deeply entrenched. While laws have been strengthened, many believe that the cultural mindset toward women has not shifted significantly enough. The battle for gender equality, safety, and dignity for women is ongoing, and Jyoti Singh's legacy continues to inspire those who are pushing for change. That's all for tonight's story. Another thread in the web of true crime, quietly unraveling as the night goes on. If you're still with me, thanks for listening. And if sleep has already taken you, may your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. I'll be here next time by the fire with another story waiting to be told. Good night, and don't forget to lock your doors.